Welcome back everyone to Who is That Image Consultant? And today I'm really excited about our guest because it is Clare Maxfield. And Clare has been someone I've known for a long time. And I think there's few people in the industry that's had quite a career that spanned as much as Clare has. And lots of things have happened. I think you're going to find Clare's interview really interesting. So I'm going to start by saying welcome, Clare.
Thank you, Anne, for having me.
You're very welcome. Now, Clare, like everybody, we like to start right at the very beginning. So tell me a little bit about your life before Image. What did you do? Where did you grow up? All those sorts of things.
Okay, Anne. Well, I'm a Melbourne girl. And interestingly enough, I'm back in the house I was born in some 50-odd years ago. And I had a great career. So I modelled in my early 20s. And then at about the age of 24, I was fortunate enough to get into the airlines. And I had a 13-year career as a flight attendant with a now collapsed Australian airline called Ansett Airlines. And so during that time, I did a lot of travelling. I actually did a lot of travelling even before I started flying. As a 19-year-old, I spent 5 months overseas backpacking around. And then with the airlines, there was a lot of travel there. I was a cabin manager for 4 years of that time, and it was just an exciting time of my life, filled with lots of people, lots of places, lots of fun.
I think it's really interesting how we look back on our career and we see things that have been put in our life to almost prepare us for what we're doing. So working as a flight attendant, you'd get to work with a lot of people and you'd start to really know how to communicate and handle people really well.
Look, on the odd day, I could be dealing with over 1,000 people, depending if we were on a 767 doing 4 legs, which other flight attendants out there know, Melbourne, Sydney return backwards and forwards like a yo-yo. There would be close to 900 people I would interact with on that given day. And you've got to be nice to all of them, whether it's 4 a.m. in the morning or midnight at night.
And I imagine some of them aren't too nice.
Luckily in those days, it wasn't quite as affordable, shall I say, to travel as it is today. So we used to laugh because we didn't have the bus style travellers. Majority of them were nice. You had to deal with the odd angry person, but I learned very early in my career how to conflict resolution, which we learned as cabin managers. And it's amazing sometimes just speaking to a person who's upset or even just listening to them can completely deflect something that can blow up, and it purely comes from either using words or the absence of words.
That's really interesting. I guess that's where cabin fever comes from. Do you think?
Anyway. No, do you know what? I remember one, and I'll tell one story, and I repeat this a lot because this will happen in every industry. There will be that one person, and in our case, they would something went wrong at home, then there was a trouble getting to the airport, then there was trouble parking, then there was trouble checking in, then they went to the wrong gate and their flight may have been delayed, and then someone walked past them and spilled coffee or ice cream on them, and they got on the plane, and I just looked at them and they're going, ah!
And then there's a kid kicking the seat.
Yeah. And everything's happened to them. It's like with what we do. It's the consultant gone out and they've worked with someone else who wasn't good to them, or then they bought something, their partner didn't like it didn't fit, they didn't get the return they wanted, it had a hole in it when they got. There will always be that one person and they're unhappy.
I know, it's almost like the gods are against them. Okay, so that's great. So you did that. How come you got into Image?
It was interesting. So our airline went into administration. We kind of went down with the towers. 2 days later, we were in administration. A month later, we came out and we were kind of in a kind of limbo, shall we say. Many of us were told we're getting our jobs back in March, some weren't, but a lot of us sort of went, what do we do next? And during that time, I started thinking, well, what would I do? And I started researching. I remember I'd had my colours done in the 80s. And I saw image consultant courses. So I would have been the very early days of Google, finding it on the internet. And then I found life coaching because I'm one of those kind of I wasn't going to say uneducated, but after school, I went into modelling. I don't have a degree behind me. I didn't have a career to fall back on. Really good at serving tea and coffee, Didn't actually understand my people skills until later and thought I'm unskilled. I did get into Qantas, but it wasn't the same. And I discovered life coaching, image consulting. And I went, well, I've got no life skills. I'll become an image consultant. And that's, and when I started training with you, the airlines closed their doors finally on the 4th of March in 2002. And I believe I started training with you in April, and then I got into Qantas, and I started with them in May, and the whole time I was in my Qantas training school, I was designing my website, designing my business cards, and reading image books, and went, oh, but I'm still a flight attendant. This is so much fun. And it was interesting. So I started a career with Qantas, and then I started with you, and then jobs started coming in. And then I'd get annoyed because someone would want to book me, and I'd be doing, because I was on call all the time, a job. 6 months after starting with Qantas, I left and I dived. So it would have been, I started my business in June 2002. That's when I registered it. So we're coming up for 17 years in 2 months. And I remember the day I was going through the terminal, I was going through the Virgin terminal. So part of the reason because I'm Virgin. And then a year later I went, oh my God, if you didn't do that and that didn't happen and Ansett wouldn't close, I wouldn't be starting on some of the amazing opportunities I've had. Doors open that I did not even know existed.
Yes, I can say exactly the same thing. So, okay, you're trained. Now you're out there in the world and you haven't got that income behind you that you were having before. What did you do to get the ball rolling? And tell me about your career from that point.
I was fortunate in that I had a redundancy package to fall back on, because can I tell you, I think I made $5,000 in that first year. But the good thing was, or no, it might have even just been $3,000. And when you come from, a reasonable income, so I had as I said, my redundancy. But luckily, because I had nothing else, it's not like I came in part-time, which, look, is good for some people, but it does make it a bit slower. I had nothing else. Every year I doubled my income. So I did 3, then I did 6, then I did 12, then I did 24, then I did 48. So and it was within, I think, 8 years. Now, anyone who's watching this, anything's possible. Within about 8 years, I was on 6 figures. And I went, now that's not my wage, that was my income, but considering that was paying for my phone, that was paying, rent for the room in my house, that was going towards my mortgage, it was paying for my car. So most people use their wage to pay for those things. So the income from my business was paying for those.
Right. And so all that work doesn't just flow in because you're lucky, right? That work flows in because you do a heck of a lot of work. So what were some of the things you did to make that work flow in?
First and foremost, what worked then still works today, and you'll know the word I'm going to use, networking. I was out all the time. Most of my work came from people I met, people I spoke to. Well, maybe I shouldn't say most of it, 50%, because I started writing a newsletter. And and I must admit, and we'll get to where I am now very soon, the last couple of years I haven't been as good with it, but I started writing a newsletter, which I'm going to do, my first little thing, created this, and we'll come to that in a minute. But people said to me many times, they'd call and they go, I've been reading your newsletter for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So it was the two things. This was before social media was out there. There was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was just a newsletter. So how I do it now is slightly different, but it's that, and it was definitely networking. And networking, I must tell people, is not it won't happen overnight, but it will happen. I'm sorry for anyone who's not in Australia, you won't understand why I just said that the way I did. Those who do might. It's something that you have to be consistent with. You choose the networking groups that suit your market, that are the people who are your market, and go. And that is where my business definitely came from. But then within 3 years, this little baby was the best business card ever.
And tell me, how did you get to write a book? Did you self-publish it, or did someone come to you?
Neither. I decided I was going to write a book. So back when I'm in Qantas training, researching, one of my best friends, her first book is published. So I'm going into the bookstores, Borders, all of those. There's a big life-size cardboard cutout of her holding her book. And I was a member of National Speakers, which is now Professional Speakers Association. No, they all said, if you want to get ahead, the best thing is to write a book. So I went, I'm going to write a book. So that's why my first lot of newsletters, every week I would write 7 tips on looking younger, looking slimmer, looking more corporate, and tips for men. And they would go out. And I remember one day I was sitting on the dining room table. I'm writing my tips. And I remember my mother saying to me, why are you doing that? And I said, it'll be a book one day, Mum. And I went to my girlfriend who's standing in Borders in the cardboard cutout and said, how did you get your book published? She said, I was approached. And I'm thinking, of course you were. She said,
lucky girl.
Yes. And I said, how do I do that? She said, let me put you onto my agent. Yes. So I went along and I met her agent and I showed him my mock, which was a little tip and an image, kind of what an Instagram post is or a blog is today. And he said, nice idea, no thanks. And I went, oh, okay, walked away. He rang me a week later and goes, I've been thinking about your book. I'm going to try and get you a publisher. 12 months later, kind of a Harry Potter thing, not the same ending, but anyway, 12 months later, I was picked up by a publishing house and they said, we love what you're doing, but we want you, because I gave them 50 posts, 50 pages. They said, we want 300. So I then started writing hundreds of these. And this one came out in 2004. And then 6 months later, they said immediately, we want the corporate version.
And you know what, to me, even though they're 2004, they look like they could be on the shelves right now.
And then very quickly, within 18 months, I had 3 books. And you're right. In fact, I was approached by a publisher, kind of a self-publishing house the other day. She said, I want to get your books back out there again. So they are about to be rebranded and reset out. This one alone ended up, and this is if you're ever going to ask me what is my most exciting story, when I got an order for 80 copies from Estee Lauder, New York, I felt like I'd made it.
That is really exciting. I didn't know that story. Having written those books, what was the result? Was it just a lovely feeling and you made a little bit of money and that was it? Or were they a launching point of some point? I thought they might have been.
Possibly good for me, not so good for you at the time, Anne, because as you know, at the time I was one of your consultants. I was approached by Kazakhstan. I know it's a natural progression from Melbourne to start to do some training. And I went, the guy said, will you post your books? I posted my books to him in Kazakhstan. He said, do you train? I went, no. Do you train? I went, no. And he said, do you train? I went, he rang me at home and I went, speak to me. And because of that, 6 months later, I found myself training in Russian, which is another natural progression, in Kazakhstan. Now, that didn't go the distance. Interestingly, though, 15 years later, John and I are still very close. My translator and I are still very close. And because of that, I then started my own training business. And I then wrote the first online image consultant training program.
And of course, at that stage, you had left the association with us at that time, who was the Australian Image Company, and you had gone out and formed your own company. Yes?
Yes, I remember your parting words to me is going, we will be friendly competitors. And we did. We remained friendly and competitors.
Yeah, that's life, isn't it? You know, I know from my point of view, you know, when you train people up and they one day say to you, I'm going to start my own company, part of me always goes, okay. But that's life, you know, you have to just suck it up. And
that's happened to me.
Yeah, and I think that when those sorts of things happen, it makes us all rise our game a little, you know, and that's good for us, and it's good for the industry, and it's good ultimately for the customer as well. Okay, so you've got your books, you've done your Kazakhstan trip. What next?
Okay, well, then I came back here and I was approached. We both are members of the Association of Image Consultants International, AICI, and I was approached by them to join the international board, which was quite an honour. So I'd been the Melbourne president. I think we've both been the Melbourne president a number of times. And next thing, I found myself travelling backwards and forwards between here and America. And my role was looking after all the chapters around the world.
You are such a people person.
Oh, yeah. So it was, and that was great, because what that did for me is I would find myself, and as I still do in my role now, explaining to consultants how they can build their businesses. And then things sometimes trip out of my tongue and I'll go, Claire, why aren't you doing that? And I would be implementing things I found myself telling other people to do.
Right. So, and it wasn't too long before you won an award.
I did, and I just happened to have it off the shelf here. It's a nice big one. It's the Jane Segerstrom Award. And the Jane Segerstrom Award is an AICI award that's not always given out. There are a few years they did it to the consultant who's helped grow business and the career of image consultant globally to create a more global awareness. So I received that in 2008, which was such a joy and a privilege.
And you know, it was great for us Aussies who were at the conference to wave that flag and go, yeah, go Aussie, and we're all so proud of you. It sounds like your career is on a total high. Is that how it's always been?
That's how it was.
So what happened?
I just come out in here, and I have my men's suiting business in there. And interestingly, I will bring this in now because a couple of things happened that really changed the trajectory of my business. So I had my men's suiting business. I had 300 men on my books. I was going out. I was putting them in their suits, shirts, ties. They loved me. I'd just say, here you go. I'd get their clothes for them. They didn't pay me for my consulting work. They just paid me. I was picking up the clothes through wholesalers. Average client was spending $1,000 at a time, $500. Thank you. Good day. It was a wonderful time. A whole lot of things happened at once that was then compounded by something else. So the first thing, I found out the woman I bought the suiting business off had diddled me on the books. So I had paid more for something I shouldn't. But luckily I ended up managed getting myself out of that. But I felt bad about that. I hate making bad financial decisions. I had then decided, because I'd been published on all these, I can self-publish. So I self-published this, which I've got to say is my favourite book. Only, and I invested a lot of money in this, only to have the first lot come from overseas and discover that not only are all the comments from the editor and myself still within the text, but the layout is really poor.
I didn't even know that.
Oh, yeah. I was then found another local self-publisher. So can I tell you, anyone who's watching, if you want to self-publish, talk to me first. I can tell you every mistake not to make. So then we did it again at more expense to myself.
What?
But that was, so then I've got a financial cost. So again, I'm sitting there, almost in the corner going, oh my God, I've just lost close to $30,000.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. And then, as you know, my husband and I started going through problems. Now, he was my rock. And when I started this business, he would tell everyone, do you know what Claire did? Claire did a 20-minute talk the other day and got paid $1,800, which I did. And he would tell people all these things, and she's great. Then all of a sudden, and he was kind of okay with him, but things changed with him, which I won't go into. But he started becoming someone else. And my marriage went on the rocks to the point, you know, the movie Living with the Enemy, I think that's what it's called. He'd come home and I'm like, who are you? And for 5 years, and the last 3, living somewhat in a sense of fear, I all but shut down. If it wasn't for me being in business with someone else at the time, you wouldn't have seen me, because for 2 years, as you know, Anne, I was too afraid to leave the doors unlocked. I would get out of my car when the garage was down because I was afraid for my life.
That's horrifying.
My world imploded.
And that must be just the most devastating thing to go through. So at this time, you had taken up a partnership with Imogen?
Yes, I had. I had gone, just before it all started going pear-shaped, her and I had gone into business because, interestingly, we had created a colour system together, and she had her training school, I had my training school, and we said, you know what, let's bring the training schools together because we used the one colour system. And we did. And it was a very interesting time. And when you sometimes think people come into your life for a reason, because it kept me up, it kept me working, because if it wasn't for that, I don't think I could have worked as effectively. I mean, at the peak of it, I went to speak at a conference I'd been speaking at, went up to a woman, it'd be like me coming up to you and going, can you tell me where Anne is, please? And the girl goes, Claire, it's me. And I went, that's a sign of how much my divorce is affecting me. I couldn't say, it was very good working with Imogen. We had the students coming in. It was great. It was what I needed at that time. But at that time, also still worked very, very independently. So I was still working on my own, and we had the business together. And the only reason we stopped working was when you came and approached me, knowing that, you know, there were some things where I still wasn't fully engaged in my world, I suppose. And you said, would you come and work with me?
I actually remember one AICI retreat we went on, and I had been thinking, you know, I don't want to keep doing this all by myself because it's so much work running this company. And, you know, I want a succession plan, and I just want somebody to work with me. And we'd been going to a lot of AICI meetings together, and this was a retreat. And I remember everyone had gone off into a shop, and you and I were just standing outside. I know exactly where we were in Sorrento. And I thought, you know what? I reckon Claire and I could work really well. We're very complementary to each other. And I said to you at that time, you know, I think one day we'll work together. And then I think it was maybe 2 years after that I actually approached you and said, Claire, let's have a chat, because I think I've got something that I'd like to talk to you about. And here it is, history. We've been working together now for what, 18 months? Is it 3 years? Oh my gosh. Okay. So time flies when you're having fun. And it's been, I think, a great relationship between us, because those of you who know us, Claire and I, are very different. Claire's very extrovert. I'm not so much extrovert. Claire's very much a people person. I'm not so much. Where I like to do some creativity and stuff like that, Claire gets into the nitty gritty and all the gritty stuff, which I don't like. So we work very, very well together. And I really think, you know, I am blessed to have you in this business. So we've really chatted for quite a while. So let me ask you the same question I ask everyone as we end. If you were to go back and give your younger new image consultant self a word of advice, what would you say?
I would start off by even going before the young image consultant of myself. I would start to the young person of myself and say, believe in yourself, because it's lovely to have someone to support you, but if your career is built up and they're part of that support, when that goes, you're left floundering. So my first thing is believe in yourself. And yes, you do want to have supporting people around you, but you can do it. The second thing is don't compare yourself to anyone else, because the one thing I've found is there is plenty of work out there, but if you try and be a mini someone else, and I've got to tell you a story, Anne. When I first started, I became a mini you. I went out and don't know if you remember at the time, it was lots of dresses and long jackets were kind of in matching fabrics. And I had one made in lime.
Oh, we were back in the suit era, yeah.
Yeah, one made in like a terracotta orange. And I was sort of following your style because there is an element in, you know, if you're going to do something, find the masters, those that do it well, and take from them what works from you. And a woman I met at one of my talks, met her years later, she said, I remember seeing you right in the beginning. She said, you were fun. We could tell you weren't too sure what you were doing, but you were fun. So my thing is, you know, get inspiration from those around you who are doing it well. Make it your own. Don't compare yourself. As I said, get the inspiration. Don't compare yourself. But get out there and talk to people. Do not just think you're going to build the website and build it, they will come. This is not Field of Dreams. You need to be active. So if you're going to get on Instagram, do it every day. If you're going to get on Facebook, find your tribe. I trained one woman once who she used to make patterns and make clothes. She's made a huge business out of teaching people. She called herself the Pattern Whisperer. You work on where you've come from, and that people will believe in you, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
That's
out there.
Well, thank you, Claire. It's been great, and I know everyone's going to learn a lot from hearing about you, and just it's really interesting to hear everyone's story. And I love how with everyone we've interviewed so far, well, the first thing I find really interesting is not one person has said, I've grown up dressing Barbie dolls and doing all that sort of stuff. They've come from various careers into image consultancy. So that's really interesting. But everybody's got a story. Everyone's got something we can relate to. So I thank you very much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Anne.
So everyone, that's the end of another interview. I hope you'll join us again next time when we interview another interesting image consultant. So from me and Claire, bye for now.